To what end, Michael? Like, I read about, the notion that we need to, turn to plant-based foods and insect-based protein in the future, and that, meat production and all the cow methane are contributing to the degradation of the environment. But like, what do you see this as a plan, or just as a part of the globalist utopian, ideologically blind stupidity? Because, farmers do pollute. There is runoff from fertilizer. It does cause algal blooms, for example, in the water. And these are problems. I don't think they're insurmountable problems. But you're pointing to something that's more malevolent and deeper and programmatic. And we don't want to go there without questioning that presumption. I always think if you can explain it with stupidity, you don't have to explain it with malevolence.
Well, as you know, be careful with that one, because sometimes we do have to go to malevolence in this
I know we do, yeah.
And I watch your show enough to know you know exactly why this is happening. And let's talk about this. If the Dutch farmers, let's take this as a premise, are the most efficient in the world, or let's just say they're the second most efficient, why would you knock them out of the saddle to get somebody else to produce the food? Where? Indian farmers? Who's going to produce this food in a much less efficient way that would create even more pollution? This is clearly about control. Also, there's something that you never hear in any press that I've heard in the United States is the tri-state city. Tri-state city is this smart city that they're proposing to build between the tri-states are Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. So this mega city, basically, that would take up all this farmland in that area, and which would bring huge amounts of more people into this area, right? So the tri-state city is something you don't hear much about, but that's another part of this plan. There was a fire about maybe 10 days ago. I went to it right after the next morning, and it's at a picnic distribution center, which is there was an investment, $600 million into this picnic food distribution center from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, coincidentally, and it burned down, right? And so that brought a little, raised some eyebrows. Why did that thing just burn down? There's many of them. There's others in Netherlands that are growing, but the bottom line is the Bill and Melinda, or Bill Gates, is buying up farmland, as you know, all over the place.
I know. He is the biggest private landowner in the United States right now, and the land that he's buying up, he's taking out of food production. And it seems to be because he's obsessed about meat production, at least in part, doesn't believe that that's part of a sustainable future. And so, but I do share your skepticism. It's the same thing happens on the bloody energy front. It's like, well, Australia won't build coal-generating electrical plants, but they'll ship their bloody coal to China, where they're going to build much dirtier plants. And the same thing applies to Canada. If we shut down our energy industry, which our bloody, insane, narcissistic, delusional, traitorous prime minister happens to think is a good idea and seems to be working as hard as he can to manage, all that's going to happen is that we're going to cede the ground to people like Putin, who we also turned into a radical enemy with his hands on the control pump for Europe. I don't see how we could be stupider here in the West if we actually took courses in stupidity and tried as hard as we could. We seem to be doing everything we can to break everything as rapidly as possible. And then I wonder too, has it got to the point where the people who think, that you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, and there's too many people on the planet, think that this is some sort of like needle's eye that we have to go through, all this mass starvation and death, so that we end up with a sustainable population? Jesus Christ, that's a dim and grim scenario. But as you said, why would you take the Dutch farmers out of business when they're so unbelievably hyper-productive and efficient? It's not like there's too much food, especially not if we don't have farmers.
If anything, I would be trying to get a large agricultural institute here in Netherlands to teach other farmers how to be as efficient as Dutch farmers are, replicate these farmers. In Afghanistan, actually, many of the farmers coming over, I was out in the farms quite a lot, were actually Dutch farmers to teach Afghans how to do things better. But the bottom line is, as you can see, there is a huge, I watch you all the time, you know what's happening. There's a huge authoritarian the desire to have a one world order is clearly strong. And this isn't the first time it's happened. As you know, it's a constant in human behavior. And also as as somebody who studies the human psyche a lot, as you do, you realize pulling these farmers off of their traditional farms unroots them. It cuts their anchor, their boat anchor. They're going to be drifting, culturally, so that makes them much easier to. You can't control farmers well. That's why Stalin wanted to get rid of the farmers. Stalin had to get rid of those farmers because farmers have a mind of their own. Same with Mao. You got to get rid of those farmers because they think for themselves. And likewise here, these Dutch farmers think for themselves. And so they're the bad guys. To me, they're the great guys. These are the people
me too,
we have
man.
to defend. That's our backbone. They are our backbone. That's why I flew to Netherlands from Mexico. I mean, that's how important this is.
Big government continues to spend borrowed money, inflation continues to swell, dragging down our economy, and the stock market has entered bear territory. So what's your plan? Are your assets diversified? I'm Philip Patrick, precious metals specialist for the Birch Gold Group. For nearly 20 years, we've helped Americans diversify into gold, and we can help you too. Did you know you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered account? We can help you transfer an IRA or 401k tied to stocks into an IRA in gold. If you're skeptical about the trajectory of the economy in the US dollar, then text Jordan to 989898. Birch Gold Group will send you a free info kit on securing your savings with gold. With thousands of satisfied customers, 5-star reviews, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, we take precious metals seriously. Text Jordan to 989898 for your free info kit.
Okay, so what have you discovered on the ground there? You've been talking to farmers. Tell us, first of all, about how the protests were organized, what their scope is, and why the farmers are doing this and what they hope to accomplish.
Well, the farmers in Netherlands are amazingly cognizant of what's happening. Many people that I talk with around the world don't realize, these other things like the WEF, WEF, and these sorts of things. But the Dutch farmers are talking about it in detail. They're like, the nitrogen is nonsense, and it's all about Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates is trying to do this, and they'll go into great detail. They know exactly what's happening. They're trying to take our land because of this, and that, and the other. And, they know it. They're not just like in Panama, it's another story. Panama is just like, give us cheap gas, give us cheap cheese, cheap this and cheap that, and we'll go home, right? They're easily satisfied. Not the Dutch farmers, they're more sophisticated. These are serious players here. And again, that's why I jumped on an airplane. If people like this are blocking streets around Netherlands, and we got the German farmers joining up with them, and they're blocking the border together, German and Dutch farmers, right? Polish farmers, I love Poland. I spent 2 years there. Polish farmers are making videos in support of Dutch farmers. That's how much look, that started in Canada, jumped over to the United States. It's over here now. I mean, it's really growing. This courage is spreading. And so, and you see Italian farmers, Spanish farmers, people are rising up. And the more they realize what's actually happening, because, the man behind the curtain is the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Of course, we're going to have to deal with China, but at this rate, look, if Germany falls from these energy issues, which is looking pretty likely at this point, China is going to peel off the rock too, right? As are we economically, right? So,
for sure. Yeah, we cannot sustain the collapse of Germany. That's absolutely 100% obvious. That would be an utter bloody catastrophe.
If Germany collapses, EU's gone, right? For a while, right? And I mean, the EU will probably dissolve. That's my guess. I don't know. We'll see when time unfolds. But obviously, that'll take our economies with it, and China, right? And Japan. And of course, Japan imports, 60, 70%? All these island nations and island state like Hawaii that import, 90% of their food imported, right? They are going to be in for a world of hurt. Japan imports most of its food. And, some of these countries that I have to... and I kind of, I should say, maybe insulted the French for a while years ago and saying, why are they defending all these small farmers all the time? Now I see the French wisdom. These small farmers, that resilience and these small, when you go to France and I'm sure you've been to France. And their small farmers everywhere provide a great deal of resilience, right? And that's why in Netherlands, if they lose, these farmers are vital for that. They're as important as their army. I mean, without these farmers, you're somebody else's. You're in somebody else's pocket. Bill Gates, the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, well, and also if you lose the farmers for one generation, you lose all that knowledge. And I saw the government said, well, some of these farmers are just going to have to move. It's like, what are they going to do? They're going to move their farm. How are you going to do that? You can't move a farm. And it's not like these things are just, transferable, fungible in this simplistic manner. And so, yeah, it's such a form of insanity, and it's all justified by the fact that these half-wit globalists are claiming constantly to be moral because they're saving the planet. And I know this literature. I know the planet-saving literature, let's say, because I studied it for about 4 years and in some depth, and I think I found the world's thinkers who thought this through properly, and that would be Matt Ridley and Bjorn Lomborg and Marian Tupy, most particularly. And all three of them, and I would put Bjorn Lomborg at the top of that list, those thinkers knew something fundamental and something so bloody optimistic that I couldn't believe it was true when I first encountered it, which was that if we really want to reach a kind of sustainable harmony with the planet, the best way to do that, absolutely obviously, is to distribute autonomous free market systems as widely as possible, and then to get people everywhere in the world as rich as we can, as fast as we can. Because the biggest contributor to environmental degradation isn't industrial development. It isn't the efficiency of the Dutch farmers. It's absolute bloody poverty and privation, and the probability that people at the bottom of the economic distribution are going to fall into these catastrophic positive feedback loops that you described and devastate and lay waste to everything. As soon as you make people rich, the data on this are crystal clear. As soon as you get people up to about $5,000 a year in gross domestic product, they start caring about the environment locally and autonomously. And so, we're in a situation right now where if our leaders weren't so concerned with scoring cheap reputation points and being hyper-moral in their ignorance and pretentious in their global ambitions, we could be working towards a world where everybody had enough food and enough education and were simultaneously inspired on their own account to engage in the kind of environmental stewardship that would leave a good planet for their children and their grandchildren. We could have our cake and eat it too, And yet what we're doing is we're breaking the supply chains and dooming the poor and fostering what's going to be a mass migration into Europe. And that's just going to be a bloody catastrophe. And I hate to see this, and I hope I'm wrong and I'm just being paranoid, but I don't think so.
I don't think you're being paranoid. I spend most of my time downrange. I spend a lot of time in places like China, India, just good Lord. I mean, when you land in China, sometimes I wonder if my airplane's going to make it through the smog or we're going to get stuck like amber in the smog. It's so thick sometimes you can't see the ground. It's unbelievable. And likewise with India, right? I spent almost a year in India and another year in Nepal, right? In Thailand, where I have an office, sometimes you have to have air filters in every room, and because all of Asia's, not all of Asia, but most of Asia's burning their farmland every year. You can see it in satellite photo. Look it up. It's unbelievable. So this pollution that comes from poverty is quite intense. Not that China is poor and rich, and India obviously is increasingly wealthy, but they have huge amounts of impoverished people, and their factories still actually are behaving as if they're poor. They're dumping smog out, unfiltered. It's unbelievable. And anyway, we could go on about that forever. But the bottom line is the farmers are clearly under attack here in Netherlands. The German farmers also are very efficient. Again, I lived 4 years in Germany, and their farmers are also under attack. And so all across Europe.